Hey everyone. If you're here with us, you're probably working on getting better at English.
You got it.
And well, we're diving into the biggest challenges that people who don't speak English natively
Right.
usually have. And believe me, you're not the only one going through this.
Exactly.
We've got this awesome Speak Smart podcast episode full of tips, and we're going to break it all down so you can actually use it right away.
Love that.
So have you ever tripped over those weird English sounds
Yeah.
or felt like you just don't have the right words?
It's rough.
Well, we're going to tackle that and a lot more today.
You know what's really cool about all this is that it's not really about how hard English is,
Okay.
but it's more about how you think about it and what you do about it.
Interesting.
So we're not only going to talk about what these problems are,
Right.
but how to actually get past them.
So I guess first off, let's talk about pronunciation.
Okay.
I mean, English, with all its silent letters and vowel sounds that seem to change all the time. I mean, how is through spelled the same as tough?
It's wild.
Makes you wonder.
It does.
It can really mess with your confidence when you feel like you can't even get those basic sounds right.
Totally. I remember when I was learning French, those nasal vowels were so hard.
Oh, yeah.
It was like climbing a mountain.
I feel that. And it shows you it's not just about how you say the word.
Right.
It's about how it makes you feel, too.
For sure. So think about those sounds that trip you up.
Okay.
Is it that the difference between V and W, or maybe those tricky R and L sounds?
Ugh, those are the worst.
Whatever it is for you, the good news is that there are ways to fix it.
Okay, so let's ditch that whole idea that some people are just naturally good at pronunciation.
Yes, please.
What actually works?
So one really helpful tool is the International Phonetic Alphabet, or IPA.
Okay.
It's like a map for English sounds,
I see.
showing you where to put your tongue and mouth to make the right sound.
That's cool.
You can find free IPA charts online and even apps that help you practice.
That's so much better than just guessing.
Exactly. And you get to hear it, too.
So what about actually using these sounds? I've heard of the shadowing technique,
Oh, yeah.
where you basically copy a native speaker.
It's awesome. Have you tried that?
Shadowing's great. You just find a podcast, an audiobook, or even a video with clear English.
Okay.
Pop in your headphones and try to copy how they say it.
Oh, wow.
It's like a workout for your mouth.
I like that.
In the Speak Smart episode, they talked about Ahmed from Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
He had trouble with the word world.
Oh, yeah, that one's tough.
He used a pronunciation app and this shadowing technique and recorded himself again and again
Wow.
until he got it right. Imagine finally conquering a sound that's been tripping you up.
That's what I love about these deep dives.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just theory. We're hearing from real people who've been there.
I know, it's inspiring.
But pronunciation is only one part of it. Even if you can speak beautifully,
It's true.
not having enough words can make you feel stuck.
Absolutely. And that's where it gets interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, how so?
Because building a strong vocabulary isn't just about memorizing lists of words.
Okay, so what's the secret?
How do we actually start using new words with confidence?
Yeah.
Well, one really good way is thematic vocabulary building.
I haven't heard of that.
So instead of learning random words,
Right.
you focus on words that go together. Like, if you love to travel,
Okay.
you can make a list of words for airports, booking hotels, ordering food, asking for directions.
Oh, I get it.
You're basically building a toolbox of words for specific situations.
It's like making your own personal vocabulary map.
Exactly.
That's cool. So what about those spaced repetition apps like Anki?
Oh, yeah, those are good.
They use algorithms to show you words right when you're about to forget them.
Pretty smart, right?
It is.
Spaced repetition is a game changer. It uses how our brains work.
Interesting.
The more we see something, the better we remember it.
Makes sense.
The Speak Smart episode talked about Sarah, an engineer from Egypt.
Okay.
She wanted to learn more technical terms for work.
Okay.
So she decided to learn 10 new terms every day using Anki.
Wow.
And within a few weeks, she was using those words in meetings and presentations.
That's amazing how learning new words can really help you in real life.
It's powerful.
You know, even with lots of words, there's this other thing that can hold us back.
What's that?
Fear of making mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a little voice saying, what if I sound silly?
I know, right?
What if people judge me? Have you ever felt that?
Oh, totally. That fear is so normal.
Okay, good.
And I think it comes from this idea that you have to be perfect when learning a language.
Right, like you can't mess up.
But really making mistakes is part of learning.
Okay.
Think about it. Kids learn their first language by trying things out,
That's true.
making sounds, and slowly getting better at pronunciation and grammar.
I guess we forget that making mistakes is how we learn.
Exactly. The Speak Smart episode was all about changing how we think about mistakes.
I like that.
Instead of seeing them as failures,
Mm.
we need to see them as chances to learn and grow.
So how do we get over that fear and start speaking more confidently?
One great way is to find a group where you can practice without feeling judged.
Okay.
This could be a conversation group online, a language exchange meetup, or even a friend who's also learning English.
Yeah,
The key is to make it a safe place to try things out,
that makes sense.
make mistakes, and get helpful feedback. They also mentioned Manuel from Mexico.
Okay.
He was super shy about speaking English. At first, he was scared to even talk.
Oh,
But the group was so nice and encouraging that he slowly started to join in more and more.
that's awesome. The people around you can really make a difference.
They really can.
It's so encouraging to know there are groups out there where you can practice without feeling judged.
Right.
But let's be real.
Okay.
English grammar can be a real nightmare.
Uh-huh. It can be.
All those rules and exceptions, it's enough to make your head spin.
I know. But here's the thing.
Well, that's that.
We don't need to know every single rule to communicate well.
So where should we focus?
The Speak Smart podcast suggested starting with the basics,
Okay.
like simple sentences, subject-verb agreement, basic tenses.
Got it.
Once you have a good foundation, you can build from there.
Makes sense.
We talked about Aaliyah from Indonesia. She had a really smart approach.
Okay, what does she do?
She focused on just one grammar rule per week,
Okay.
practiced it in short emails, and then moved on to the next rule.
I like that.
It's all about breaking things down into smaller pieces.
That's a great strategy. It reminds me of another challenge a lot of people face.
What's that?
Not being immersed in English.
Ah, yeah, that's a tough one.
If you don't live in an English-speaking country, how do you get that constant exposure
Right.
that helps you learn naturally?
It's definitely a challenge, but it's not impossible.
Okay, so what can we do?
The key is to get creative and create your own little English world right where you are.
Interesting. How do we do that?
One simple trick is to change all your device settings to English.
Oh, like my phone and computer.
Exactly. Your phone, your computer, your social media.
Okay.
Suddenly you're seeing English everywhere.
It's like those immersion schools where you can't speak your native language.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But in this case, you're doing it yourself.
I see. So it's more than just seeing English passively.
Right. The Speak Smart episode talked about actively engaging with English media.
Like what kind of stuff?
Podcasts on topics you like, English news websites, movies and TV shows with subtitles.
Yeah.
They told the story of Ravi, an IT professional from India.
Okay.
He turned his daily commute into an English learning opportunity.
That's cool. Tell me more. I'm always trying to use those little bits of time.
So Ravi started listening to podcasts about technology and business during his commute.
I could see that.
Then he'd talk about what he learned with his colleagues at work.
Wow.
It was a great way to combine his love for his job with his desire to learn English.
That's brilliant. Finding ways to make English part of your everyday life.
Exactly.
It's not just about setting aside time to study.
Right.
It's about making those small moments count. But, you know, even with all the best tips and tricks.
Yeah. One of the biggest challenges is managing our time.
It's true.
Life gets busy, work, family, social events.
For sure.
And it can feel impossible to squeeze in English practice.
It can.
Do you have any strategies for staying consistent with learning English?
We do, actually.
Even when life gets crazy.
Even when life gets crazy.
Okay, tell me everything.
We'll dive into that in part 2 of our deep dive.
Perfect. Can't wait to hear it.
It's going to be good.
All right, so let's talk time management.
Let's do it.
I think we've all been there,
For sure.
feeling like there just isn't enough time in the day for everything,
Yeah,
let alone learning a new language.
absolutely. But remember those SMART goals we mentioned?
Oh, yeah?
That's where we start.
Okay.
Saying, I want to be fluent in English is a great thought.
Right.
But it's not really helpful for taking action.
So what should we say instead?
You need something specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
Okay, so instead of fluent, could I say, I want to be able to talk about my hobbies in English?
Comfortably for like 10 minutes within 3 months.
Now you're talking.
Okay, cool.
That gives you a clear target and a deadline.
I see.
And once you have that,
Yeah.
you can break it down into smaller steps.
Okay, like what?
Maybe that's spending 15 minutes every morning learning vocabulary about your hobbies,
Okay.
or joining a conversation group online that meets twice a week.
Those smaller steps seem much easier than this big idea of becoming fluent.
Exactly.
But even with smaller goals,
yeah,
how do we actually fit them into our busy schedules?
that's a good question.
life always seems to get in the way.
Right.
And sometimes that English practice is the first thing to go.
I know, but that's where microlearning comes in.
Micro-learning.
It's all about finding those little bits of free time in your day
Okay.
and turning them into tiny learning opportunities.
So like what?
Waiting for your coffee to brew,
Yeah.
review some flashcards,
Okay.
commuting to work,
Uh-huh.
listen to an English podcast.
Oh, I see.
Even 5 or 10 minutes here and there can really add up.
You're making me rethink my whole morning routine.
Uh-huh.
Instead of scrolling through social media while my coffee's brewing, I could be testing myself on new words.
Exactly. There's a whole different way of thinking.
It is, but I have to admit, sometimes those little bursts of learning
Yeah,
don't feel as effective as a longer study session.
I hear that.
Does microlearning really work?
It definitely does.
Okay, good.
The key is to be consistent and focused during those short moments.
Right.
The Speak Smart podcast told a story about Lila, a busy mom from Jordan.
Okay.
She managed to learn new English phrases while making dinner.
Wow.
She'd put flashcards on her kitchen cabinets
Clever.
or listen to podcasts while she cooked.
I love that turning her kitchen into a learning zone.
I know, it's great.
It shows you that you don't need a fancy classroom or hours of free time to make progress.
You don't?
You just need to be creative and fit it into your life.
Exactly. But, even with the best plans,
Yeah.
sometimes our motivation can fade.
It's true. What happens when we hit those slumps?
Well, motivation is kind of like a muscle.
Okay.
It needs to be exercised and strengthened.
So like going to the gym.
Exactly. And just like with physical exercise, there will be days you don't feel like it.
I definitely know that feeling.
But here's the thing.
What's that?
Even on those days when you're not feeling motivated, doing something even for just 5 minutes is better than doing nothing.
So even if I just review a few flashcards or listen to a short podcast,
Yes,
it's still worth it.
absolutely. It's all about keeping that momentum going
Okay.
and keeping English in your life. And remember, motivation often comes after action.
Oh, that's interesting.
Once you start doing something, even if it's small, you'll often find your motivation coming back.
That's a good point.
It's like I say, just start.
Yeah, sometimes getting started is the hardest part.
It can be. But speaking of motivation,
Yeah,
I think it's also really important to find the right resources and methods for you.
that makes sense.
It's easy to get overwhelmed with all the apps, websites, and courses out there.
There are so many.
So how do you choose what works best for your learning style?
That's a good question.
I would start by thinking about what you like.
Okay,
Do you learn better in structured environments, or do you prefer things to be more informal?
that's a good point.
Are you a visual learner, an auditory learner, or a kinesthetic learner?
I guess we all have different styles.
We do. Once you know what works for you,
Yeah.
you can start to narrow down your choices.
So if I'm someone who likes structure and learns best with visuals, maybe a textbook or a well-organized online course would be good.
Exactly.
Okay.
But if you're someone who's more free-spirited
Right.
and learns best by doing things and interacting with others,
Yeah,
maybe language exchange apps or online conversation groups would be better.
I see. And it's okay to try different things.
Absolutely. There's no one right way to learn a language.
That's good to know.
It's about finding what makes you curious and keeps you interested.
We've talked a lot about online resources,
We have.
but I think it's important to remember the power of books.
Oh, yes.
There's something special about reading a good story in English.
I agree. Do you have any favorite English books you'd recommend for learners?
I do, but I'm curious about yours first.
Oh, I could talk about books all day.
Me too.
But for language learners,
Yeah,
I think it's important to choose books that are enjoyable and easy to understand.
that makes sense.
Starting with graded readers.
What are those?
They're books specifically written for different levels of English.
Oh, cool.
Can be a great way to build confidence.
I like that.
And as you learn more words and grammar,
Mm-hmm.
you can slowly move on to more challenging books.
What's really cool about reading in English
Yeah,
is that you're not just learning vocabulary and grammar,
right.
you're also getting a glimpse into different cultures and perspectives.
It's true. It's like a window into another world.
And speaking of culture,
Yes,
I think it's a really important part of learning a language that we often forget about.
you're right. Language and culture are so connected, you can't really separate them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Understanding the culture behind the language
Hmm.
can make your communication so much better.
So how do we go beyond just words and grammar rules
Right.
and really start to understand the culture?
The best way is through immersion.
Immersion.
And I don't just mean traveling to an English-speaking country,
Okay.
although that's amazing, of course.
Of course.
You can immerse yourself in culture through movies, TV shows, music, podcasts, books, articles.
Got it.
Anything that gives you a taste of how people in English-speaking cultures live and think.
It's like opening yourself up to new experiences and ways of seeing the world.
Exactly.
And sometimes those cultural encounters can be surprising, even funny.
Oh, for sure.
I remember when I was in England,
Yeah.
I heard someone say, "It's raining cats and dogs."
Haha.
And I was so confused.
Yeah.
I literally thought animals were falling from the sky.
That's a great example of how idioms and expressions can be so tied to culture.
Yeah, and humor can be tough for language learners.
It can.
What's funny in one culture might not be funny in another. So how do we understand English humor?
It's a good question.
It can be tricky.
The key is to be open-minded and curious.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to ask if you don't get a joke.
Yeah.
Most native speakers are happy to explain it.
Right.
And as you learn more about the culture, you'll start to understand those little jokes and references.
It's all part of the process.
It is.
Speaking of learning,
Mm-hmm.
I think another challenge a lot of learners face is self-doubt.
That's a big one.
It's so easy to get discouraged when you feel like you're not making progress fast enough.
It is, or when you compare yourself to others.
Ugh, comparison is the worst.
It really is. How do we stay positive and keep those negative thoughts from holding us back?
Yeah. How do we do that?
Mindset is everything.
Okay.
It's so important to have a growth mindset.
What does that mean?
It means believing that you can get better,
I like that.
that your abilities aren't fixed,
Okay.
that you can learn and grow with effort and dedication.
So instead of saying I'm terrible at grammar,
Mm.
I might say I'm still working on my grammar, but I'm getting better every day.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's about changing your focus from what you can't do to what you can do.
I see.
And it's not just about positive thinking.
Okay.
It's about actually looking for challenges and seeing them as chances to grow.
So when you hit a wall,
Yeah.
instead of getting upset,
Mm-hmm.
you ask yourself, what can I learn from this?
Exactly.
Or how can I do this differently?
It's about seeing those challenges as stepping stones to fluency.
I like that metaphor.
And I think another really important part of a growth mindset
Yeah.
is being okay with not being perfect.
That's a tough one for me.
I hear that.
I'm a bit of a perfectionist.
And I get it.
It's hard to let go of that need to get everything right.
I know, but in language learning, perfectionism can actually slow you down. Think about it. When kids are learning their first language,
Yeah.
they make tons of mistakes.
They do.
They babble, they say words wrong, they use the wrong grammar,
It's true.
but they don't let that stop them.
Right. They just keep going.
They keep trying, keep practicing, and eventually they learn the language.
That's a really encouraging way to think about it.
It is.
It's like giving ourselves permission to mess up, to make mistakes, and to learn from them.
Exactly, and it's about celebrating those little wins along the way.
I like that.
Every time you use a new word in a conversation,
Yeah.
every time you understand a little more of a podcast,
Mm-hmm.
every time you feel a bit more confident speaking,
Right.
those are all wins worth celebrating.
It's about enjoying the journey, not just the destination.
Exactly.
But I have to ask,
Go ahead.
what about those times when you feel stuck?
Uh-huh.
When you're not seeing the progress you wanted?
It's tough.
How do you deal with that discouragement
It's a good question.
and stay motivated?
First, acknowledge those feelings. They're totally normal.
Good.
Everyone who's ever learned a new language has felt that way at some point.
That makes sense.
But here's the thing.
What's that?
Those feelings don't have to control you.
Oh.
You can choose how you respond to them.
So instead of letting those negative thoughts take over,
Mm,
I can pause, take a breath, and remind myself why I started learning English
exactly.
and what my goals are.
You got it.
That's helpful. And sometimes,
Yeah.
do you think it's good to take a break from English?
Sometimes it's really helpful
Yeah.
to step back from the language for a bit.
Like a little vacation.
Exactly. Do something else you enjoy. Recharge your batteries and then come back to it.
That sounds nice.
It is.
It's about finding that balance,
Right.
being dedicated to learning, but also knowing when to take a break.
It is. And I think another good way to stay motivated
Yeah.
is to connect with other learners.
Like a support group.
Kind of share your struggles, celebrate your wins, and learn from each other.
I can see that.
There's something really powerful about knowing you're not alone.
It's like having a team for your language learning journey.
Exactly. And when you celebrate those wins together,
Yeah.
it makes it even more fun.
And speaking of celebrating wins, I think it's important to remember that learning a language is a marathon,
It is.
not a sprint.
Not at all.
It's a long journey with its own pace.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How do we stay committed to that long-term vision
Yeah.
and not get bogged down by the challenges?
It can be tough.
I think the key is to find joy in the process.
Okay.
Learning English shouldn't feel like a chore.
Right. It should be fun.
It should be an adventure,
I like that.
a chance to explore new worlds, connect with new people, and expand your horizons.
That's beautiful. And what about those little wins?
Celebrate them.
Okay.
Mastering a new grammar rule,
Yeah.
having your first conversation in English, understanding a joke in a movie,
Mm-hmm.
those are all worth celebrating.
And even on those days when you don't feel like you're making progress,
Yeah.
you're still learning.
You're absorbing new information and building those connections in your brain.
You're making me feel so much more positive about the whole language learning experience.
That's great to hear.
It's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's about enjoying the ups and downs, celebrating those little wins, and making it a fun and meaningful part of your life.
I love that.
And thinking back to all those inspiring stories from the Speak Smart podcast, it's clear that there's no one right way to learn English.
There isn't.
It's about finding what works for you, staying persistent, and never giving up on your dreams.
Well said.
Those are some great words to live by.
Thanks.
So to all the language learners out there listening, believe in yourselves, embrace the challenges, and never stop exploring the amazing world of English.
You got this.
We're back. And, through all this talk about getting better at English, we've covered a lot of tips and tricks.
Yeah.
But for me, the biggest thing has been realizing how important your mindset is.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the foundation for everything. It shapes how you deal with challenges,
Yeah.
how you see your progress,
Yeah.
and ultimately how well you'll do in your language learning journey.
It's easy to get stuck in those negative thoughts, you know?
Oh, yeah, I know those thoughts.
Like, I'm not good at languages, I'll never sound like a native speaker, or I'm making too many mistakes.
It happens to all of us.
But what I'm realizing is those are just thoughts.
Right?
They don't have to control us.
That's where the idea of a growth mindset comes in.
Growth mindset.
It's about believing that you can learn and grow,
Okay.
that your abilities aren't set in stone.
I like that.
You can improve with effort and dedication.
So instead of saying, I'm terrible at grammar, you might say, I'm still working on my grammar,
Right.
but I'm making progress every day.
Exactly. It's about shifting your focus from limits to possibilities.
Okay.
And it's not just about positive self-talk.
Right.
It's about actively seeking out challenges and seeing them as opportunities to grow.
So like when you hit a roadblock, you don't get discouraged.
Right.
Instead, you ask, what can I learn from this?
Exactly.
Or how can I try this a different way?
It's about seeing those challenges as stepping stones to fluency.
Love that. And
Yeah.
another important part of this growth mindset
What is it?
is being okay with not being perfect.
Oh, that's a tough one.
As for me,
Especially for perfectionists.
I am a bit of a perfectionist.
I get it. It's hard to let go of that need to get everything right.
But I'm starting to see that in language learning,
Uh-huh.
wanting everything to be perfect can actually stop you from making progress.
It's true. Think about how kids learn their first language.
Okay.
They make tons of mistakes.
They do.
They babble, mispronounce words, use incorrect grammar,
It's true.
but they don't let that stop them.
They just keep going.
They keep experimenting, keep practicing, and eventually they become fluent.
That's so freeing.
It is.
It's like giving ourselves permission to make mistakes and learn from them.
Exactly. And it's also about celebrating those small victories along the way.
I like that.
Every time you use a new word correctly,
Yeah.
every time you understand a bit more of a podcast,
Mm-hmm.
every time you feel more confident speaking,
Those are all worth celebrating.
they are. It's about enjoying the journey, not just the destination.
So true. But what about those times when you feel completely stuck?
It happens.
When you're just not seeing the progress you were hoping for?
I know that feeling,
How do you deal with feeling discouraged
right?
and stay motivated over the long term?
It's a great question. First, it's important to just acknowledge those feelings.
Okay.
They're completely normal.
That's good to hear.
Anyone who's learned a new language has felt that way.
Okay.
But here's the key.
What is it?
Those feelings don't have to control you.
Okay.
You get to choose how you respond to them.
So instead of letting those negative thoughts spiral out of control, I can just pause, take a breath, and remind myself why I started learning English in the first place
Exactly.
and what my goals are.
You got it.
Sometimes it's helpful to just step back from the language for a bit,
Yeah, sometimes you need a break.
like a little vacation.
Exactly. Do something else. You enjoy, recharge, and then come back to it.
It's about finding that balance.
It is.
Being dedicated, but also knowing when to be kind to yourself.
And another powerful way to stay motivated is to connect with other learners.
Oh, yeah, like a support system.
Exactly. Share your struggles. Celebrate your wins. Learn from each other.
I can see that.
It's so inspiring to know you're not alone in this.
Like having a cheering section for your language learning journey.
Exactly. And when you celebrate those wins together, it's even more fun.
And, going back to those stories from the Speak Smart podcast, it's clear that there's no single right way to overcome these challenges.
There isn't. Everyone's journey is different.
What matters most is finding what works for you.
Right.
Being persistent and embracing those moments of learning and growth.
So to all the language learners out there,
Yes.
believe in yourself.
Embrace the challenges and never stop exploring the world of English.
You got this.